Hey everybody, it is Mike Schumann of the Daily Hoosier here for another episode of East 17th Street. I am joined once again by Seth for our one opponent, one position preview series for the 2025 IU football season. Sorry for the delay in keeping this going. Obviously, was in Puerto Rico, then got some illness from Puerto Rico. So trying to power through this now. We're running out of days, Seth. So we have to power through this series. I think it's a good exercise both for us and for fans to get ready for the season. And today we are talking about the Iowa Hawkeyes in Week 5 and the Indiana wide receivers room, both interesting topics. And when you talk about Iowa, I'm guessing the first thing that comes to mind for a lot of Indiana fans, Seth, is the 2021 season, because that season was similar in my mind to 2025 in the sense that Indiana was coming off a very successful season and their first major test. In fact, in that season, their first game was on the road at Iowa, and it did not go well at all. That season completely fell off the rails right away. They never recovered. And so this won't be exactly like that because Indiana will be coming off the week 4 game we covered last time against Illinois. But nevertheless, it will be their first major road test at Kinnick Stadium. And, I think we can start right there. Kinnick Stadium is a challenging venue, over 70,000 fans are right on top of you. Whatever the state of the Hawkeyes, that is not an easy place to go play.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can learn a lot about a team by how they look in their first game on the road. And look, I mean, we saw from Indiana last year, Kurt Signetti, obviously, and, Indiana handled their road tests very well, aside from the last couple at the end of the season against the best teams of that bunch. But I think, yeah, it honestly, that, the way that they struggled, especially with the crowd noise at Ohio State, like that, and I don't know how much of that was an issue at Notre Dame, but we all remember, that was, the crowd noise and having to go to a silent count at Ohio State was a big problem for Indiana, and clearly something that they've been thinking about all offseason. And this is really going to be the first test of that, how they're going to come out and handle that crowd noise. It's a different quarterback. It's a different center. So it's not, it's not Mike Kadick snapping to Curtis Rourke where the issues popped up last year. And to be fair, it wasn't just those two. It was, there are other factors, but you have different pieces involved, in getting the snaps off cleanly and having everything run smoothly. But this is going to be the first test to see, are those problems kind of more systemic where, it's Signetti and Shanahan and whatnot, and really the staff and the program that are having trouble overcoming those issues, or was this something they were able to solve in the offseason?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that about Signetti and Shanahan because I was thinking about that recently. I mean, first of all, it was interesting, for Signetti to be so candid that, just being open. Look, we really did struggle with the silent count and the crowd noise. I mean, and what I found most interesting about that upon reflection was that, it just made me wonder how much Kurt Signetti's ever had to think about that throughout his career as a head coach. I mean, obviously, when he was back at Alabama playing in SEC venues, that was an issue. But as a head coach, at the places he has been, IU, Pennsylvania, Elon, and JMU, crowd noise, he probably never once had a game where they had to even think about it. I mean, obviously the crowd could have impacted games to some extent. It's not like a knock on the ASUN or anything, but it's just not that big a deal. And, like I said, they were open about it. They addressed it, and he's very maniacal about making changes and making improvements. So it is going to be interesting because I do think Iowa is one of those places where the crowd can be a major impact.
Right. And you say, how many times has he had to think about that through his career? I mean, even when he got to Indiana, I mean, the first few their first road test last year was at UCLA, a game that a lot of us, circled as, maybe we'll learn something about this team. That could be kind of a toss up game, at least going into the season. But you wouldn't say, based on all the reports coming out of the Rose Bowl, you wouldn't say that that was, a super loud crowd where they were going to have to go to a silent count type of game. You had that. You had Northwestern in the small makeshift stadium on the lake. You had Michigan State, which was in the middle of a bad season, and their crowd shows out. It can be a loud stadium, but certainly was not as loud as it could be up at Spartan Stadium. So that Ohio State game was probably the first. That was by far the biggest test that they were going to have faced in crowd noise up to that point anyway. So yeah, it is an interesting point, and you're right that he has been very candid about it. So, I mean, it's really just only time will tell. I mean, you can only really simulate this stuff so much in practice, and the difference between what you're able to simulate with that in practice versus, going out there and actually dealing with it in a real game situation, it's just night and day.
Yeah, and obviously he's not going to reveal much going into this Iowa game, but it would be interesting to ask him ahead of it, just kind of his process to, kind of learn or grow into, what he needed to figure out to be ready for this scenario. Because I think what happened at Ohio State was they realized they needed to make an adjustment, and they just came up with a signal, and Ohio State figured out the signal and were jumping the snap every time. That was kind of my very primitive understanding of what happened. So I'm not even smart enough to know like what the sophisticated teams do who encounter this regularly. I don't know if you have a sense for that.
I mean, not really. And I feel like you're getting to a point with the sport where you're going to not even need it I mean, you're going to need it a little bit more, I guess, in terms of actually getting the snap off. But I mean, it's not like you're at the point where you used to be where everybody's looking to the sideline and needing to, because you're able to have the earpiece now with the quarterback. So
Right.
you even deal with it a little bit less than maybe you used to. But yeah, it's, I don't know. It's hard to gauge.
So tell me what you think about this. Like I've long thought of Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan State as kind of the three Big Ten teams that Indiana needed to overcome. Like, of course, there's Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, and obviously additions on the West Coast now, including Oregon. But the tier of respectability, if I can coin that phrase, has always been, in my opinion, those three programs. And there's others, give or take, but those are kind of the three constants. They for the last 25 years or so. Maybe even longer in the case of Michigan State. Those programs have kind of set the bar in terms of, if you want to be respectable in the Big Ten, you need to contend with these teams. And I thought in 2021, Iowa just made a major statement. Of course, a lot of it had to do with Michael Penix's health. He wasn't ready to play. We know that now. But I thought they made a major statement. And I think this game is going to mean a lot to them, knowing what they did in 2021 as a staff, and then from a team perspective, like just Iowa's become a little bit of a punchline in the last few years, even though they've still posted winning seasons and still been respectable. They've taken a beating a little bit because of their offense, and I think this game is just going to mean a little bit more to them.
Well, to answer the first part of your question about the general programs that Indiana was up against, I mean, honestly, Iowa and Wisconsin probably, at least in more recent view, are probably maybe more on the outside of that sort of picture, just because they were in the other division when Indiana was only playing them once every few years. I would put Michigan State in there, and I mean, there was a period where it felt like Maryland was kind of that other team that they were kind of putting up the consistent 7-8 win seasons for a few years, felt closer to maybe knocking that door over and beating the Ohio States or Penn States of the world. That it felt like, Maryland was maybe the team that Indiana needed to try to be. But I mean, when you're looking at the Big Ten as a whole, yeah, Iowa and Wisconsin for sure were other kind of similar teams that, that Indiana as a program could aspire to at least reach to that level, and teams that, if they were going to get to a place where they wanted to be as a program, like, those are programs, Iowa and Wisconsin are the type of teams that you need to be able to compete with when you match up with them. So in terms of the motivation factor of this game, it's hard to say. And, maybe the staffs will remember, maybe the Iowa staff will remember, but there's no connection from this Indiana team to the 2021 version, aside from the fans and, the media members that are going to remember what happened. It's a completely different staff. It's no players from either team are really still carried over from that roster. Maybe the rare, like, true freshman in 2021 that's now like a 5th or 6th year senior or whatever. But even then, it's not like somebody like that would have seen the field in that game to begin with. So, I don't know how much stock I put into that being a motivating factor, but I was probably going to be motivated, outside of that, because look, this is Indiana is likely going to be a ranked team coming into that. I guess if Illinois beats the brakes off them in week 4, then maybe they won't be ranked. But, there's a pretty good chance that it's a ranked team coming into Kinnick Stadium. That already is going to be enough motivation for them. It's a ranked team that made the college football playoff last year. That's going to be motivation to Iowa. It's a ranked team that made the college football playoff last year with a head coach in Curt Cignetti that likes to make bold statements and likes to get people's attention, so to speak. I think that's going to get Iowa's attention. And so, yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a motivating factor for the Kinnick crowd, for the players on the field for Iowa, because it's an opportunity for them. Just as much as this is going to be a road test for Indiana at Iowa, this is going to be one of the bigger tests that Iowa faces this season, and it's an opportunity for Iowa to kind of make a statement.
Yep, no doubt about it. And I think it's a tricky spot for Indiana coming off that Illinois game. Curt Cignetti would never admit to this, and he seems to have, a pretty good handle on how his team moves on from week to week. But, they're either going to be really high off a big win against Illinois or pretty defeated by, a big loss to Illinois, and then to have to turn around and face a very tough, daunting road environment the next week. It's certainly a tall task. I was talking about this on a radio interview this morning, that this schedule this year just lines up completely different for Indiana. You remember last year, a lot of us were thinking, there's a nice runway for a fast start in the Big Ten for Indiana last year. I think we were thinking like 5-1, maybe some people even 6-0, which they ultimately did. But this year, it's just, we're going to know a lot quickly with Illinois, Iowa, and Oregon in consecutive fashion to start the Big Ten slate. So it's going to be very interesting. As I mentioned, Iowa's offense has been the big question mark for this team for several years now. When you researched their offense in terms of returning production and, quarterback play, what stood out to you, and do you see maybe see them turning a corner and kind of getting back to respectability on that side of the football?
So much of that question is always going to come down to quarterback play. The system being what it is, maybe that limits your ceiling a little bit, but it's always going to come down to quarterback play with something like that. And Iowa's, got a new quarterback coming in this year, South Dakota State transfer, Mark Gronowski, who, his numbers last season were, he threw 23 touchdowns in 15 games last season, 23-7 interception ratio, and he had 181 and change passing yards per game. And that doesn't exactly jump off the page for you. But even that 181 and change would be, more passing yards than any Iowa quarterback has posted since 2020. So, even for Iowa, I think is a lot of it is going to depend on, quarterback play does impact a lot of it. But for Iowa, they have been able to run the ball successfully for a little bit now. They lost Caleb Johnson to the Steelers in the offseason. Caleb Johnson was really, really good last year. Iowa's been able to run the ball well. We'll see if they're able to carry that over this year from last year. They're going to have a couple backup guys are going to be stepping up into bigger roles, but even their backup guys, from last year, had pretty good yards per carry numbers. So, you like their chances of being able to continue running the ball well. Their offensive line has typically performed well as well. It's just they haven't been able to throw the ball for much of anything. And, your ceiling is just going to be so limited as an offense. If, there's plenty of teams that'll run like a triple option, or will run like around college that'll run like a very, very explicitly run heavy type of scheme. Iowa's just kind of been pounding the ball, and they produced a running back at Caleb Johnson that's NFL caliber, but they just you got to be able to throw it for something. And I'm not saying that they need Mark Gronowski to come in and be an all Big Ten quarterback, but it's a lot of it's just going to depend on if they could get average performance, just bang average out of their passing game, then maybe they can turn a corner offensively. But I mean, like I've said, your ceiling is always going to be limited if you can't throw the ball at all.
And I think what's interesting about Gronowski, you mentioned his numbers, and that's at the FCS level. If we didn't make that clear, so 181 yards a game, just 23 touchdowns in 15 games. Those are not, in my opinion, significant numbers for if you're asking an FCS quarterback to come over to the Big Ten. To me, it doesn't suggest that he's going to be a high impact quarterback. You would have expected an FCS quarterback to just have eye catching numbers that if you are thinking he's going to translate to a major impact at the Big Ten level. So to me, it suggests more of the same. And it kind of leaves me wondering, like from an Iowa standpoint, almost to a IU basketball under Mike Woodson standpoint, where he couldn't attract certain players like wing shooters after a while because they didn't have a track record for featuring them. I just wonder if, like, from a recruiting standpoint, if going to Iowa has become kind of unattractive for transfers and for high school prospects at least on the offensive side of the football. I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing there, but defense has been something that Iowa's been pretty good at over really, for a long time under Kurt Ferentz, but they only returned 47% of their production on defense from a year ago. So they have a lot more to replace there. Anything stand out as you took a look at them on that side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean the 47% returning production. They do have 5 starters returning, but obviously it's more than just however many starters. It comes down to how productive were those starters, and how much of the depth did they lose, and all that sort of stuff. But they do have 5 starters back. Ethan Herkett, the grad student pass rusher. I mean, 11 and a half tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. I mean, they have 5 guys, but they have 3 guys up front that all had over 5.5 sacks apiece last season, 5.5, 6, and 6.5 in terms of returning starters. So I mean that their defensive front could be tough. They have 3 starters back in the secondary as well, and I mean, their defense was really, really strong last year, and I mean, they're going to need it to be strong again. We just talked about their offensive limitations. Like, we know what Iowa is at this point. They're going to need their defense to step up again this season, and I mean, they were 20th in the nation last year in total defense. For all the everybody that talks about Iowa and all that, it is all on their offense. Their defense has been pretty consistently strong, so they're going to need to be that again.
Another indication that Indiana's really we're gonna find out if they figured some stuff out in terms of playing on the road against a good defense. I'm sure Iowa's going to challenge Indiana, so I think it's going to be a competitive game. I think it's similar to Illinois in the sense that I think on paper. I think if this game was at Indiana, I think we'd all be saying Indiana's a clear favorite. But I think the way Indiana played late in the season on the road against good competition, I think does generate some doubts. But we'll see how that goes. But definitely a tough stretch for Indiana. As we pivot over to position previews for the Hoosiers, talking about wide receivers, unless you had anything else to add about Iowa before we do that.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think this wide receiver room is really interesting. Like last year, I was blown away at the amount of experience and production they had in the room, and they've almost kind of turned around and matched that again this year. You've got three guys in the room with over 1,000 yards at the FBS level, and Elijah Surratt, Jonathan Brady, and Mekhi Jackson. Surratt over 2,000 yards. You've got five guys with 46 or more catches at the FBS level, and Omar Cooper Jr. is the fifth among them, along with EJ Williams is in the mix along with Surratt, Brady, and Jackson. So this is a wide receiver room 1 through 5 that really projects to uh, pick up where they left off last year. Like they've just got a lot of weapons that they can throw at you. Do you see a drop off? Because the one thing I will say is that I think we all kind of underestimated guys like Miles Price and Keyshawn Williams, two guys that are competing for NFL roster spots and were among the most productive transfers coming in last year. So um, I could see the case. Don't forget about Miles Cross. I mean, they just had so many pieces last year. I could see the case that it's not quite as deep as it was last year, but I almost feel like it doesn't matter. Like there are so many pieces here, 1 through 5, that I don't see a major drop off.
Right. I mean, I don't know that I see a major drop off either, especially when you figure, I mean, you've mentioned all the experience, but I mean, the wide receiver that's, made the biggest noise this camp is probably outside of that group, the true freshman LeBron Bond that's been raising eyebrows with his speed all fall camp and seems like he's really pushing for a role in this wide receiver room one way or another. So, I mean, it may even go beyond the experience. And we know that Kurt Signetti has proven but in the past that, I mean, he, for all that he says about, valuing production over potential, like if there's a true freshman that proves his worth and kind of forces their hand and earns his way onto the field, he's not shy about putting them out there in those positions and using them, even if they don't necessarily have the experience to their name. So, don't sleep on LeBron Bond making an impact as well. But I mean, beyond that, I mean, I don't know that I see a big drop. I mean, look, the health, especially when you look at EJ Williams, particularly, I mean, the health is a big factor. And you have to remember also, like, they were fortunate, I mean, really across the whole roster, but especially in the wide receiver room, like they had the depth and, it worked out the way they did because they were able to stay so healthy for the whole of the season in the wide receiver room. I mean, there was not much time missed by any of these guys all season last year. And obviously they have a lot of depth, but it would start to chip away if, you start losing a couple guys here and there. I really do like this wide receiver room as well, though. I think whereas last year, I think it felt like you saw maybe a diversity of skill sets. You had, just a lot of guys that could do some different things and it kind of blended together well. It feels like this room might be even more versatile than it was last year, just because it feels like some of the individuals in the room are more virtual. I mean, I felt like a lot of, I felt like Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt put in time this offseason being able to, potentially move over to some of the other wide receiver positions. There's Omar Cooper played more played more outside last year than inside, but I think there's a decent chance you're going to see Omar Cooper playing more inside this year because of that time that they put in the offseason. I think the amount of versatility in terms of, you can move guys within different positions at wide receiver, I think that's going to make this room feel even deeper, even if they end up only playing, 4 or 5 guys in a game. It might feel even deeper because you're able to rotate through a little bit more.
Yeah, and Cooper specifically intrigues me. Like he's a guy that it just seems like each year he's made clear strides, and this is going to be year 2 with Signetti, with a lot of attention focused on Elijah Surratt, attention that he's worthy of course. But I think it kind of projects for Cooper to once again take another step. I think he's just underappreciated in terms of his speed. He was a track star in high school. He, as you said, he can play inside and be physical. I just think he can beat you in a number of ways, and I think he's a veteran guy now that I think can really go to the next level.
I totally agree. I mean, he doesn't have he didn't rack up the same numbers maybe last season as Elijah Surratt, but I mean Cooper made a lot of clutch plays last year and put himself in those spots, especially considering that I mean relative to some of the other guys that were in that room, he was one of the least experienced of that bunch that was playing for most of last season, and I'd imagine that there would be even more trust in him now compared to from Mike Shanahan, from Kurt Signetti. I'd imagine there's even more trust in him now than there was at this time a year ago. So yeah, I agree. I think Omar Cooper is definitely one to watch going into the season.
Kurt Signetti today was asked about EJ Williams, and I don't know if it raised any red flags for you. It reminded me, his response reminded me a little bit of the way he talked about Donovan McCulley last year. I think going into last year, we all thought Donovan McCulley was the guy, and I think he barely played and ended up transferring mid-season, so clearly wasn't the guy. And he said something about Williams today that like he got off to a slow start at fall camp, although he did quickly pivot and say that Williams has recovered and he's doing nice things and has a lot of potential. But he Williams is that guy that has always kind of been enigmatic, dealt with injuries, transferred midseason last year as well. Just never has seemed to reach his potential. If people don't know, was a 4-star, started his career at Clemson, had a very promising freshman year, but also dealt with some injuries at Clemson, and just has never quite reached what is a clear high ceiling. He's a big guy at 6'4". He's very fast. We stand there and watch him at fall camp run go routes, and you're just kind of in awe because you see the potential. Is this the year for EJ that he finally reaches it?
Like I said before, I think so much of it with EJ Williams is just can he stay healthy for a whole season? I mean, you talked about it before. Just the health has just been such a nagging issue all of his career, and the talent is clearly still there for EJ Williams to be the kind of playmaker that I mean, forget Kurt Signetti. I mean, forget just Kurt Signetti. I mean, the talent is still there for him to be the guy that Tom Allen thought that he was bringing in when he brought EJ Williams to Indiana initially, and he's just not. He hasn't really been able to stay on the field really for an extended period of time to make his impact felt. If this is the year that he's able to stay healthy, I think there's a solid chance that he could be productive, especially considering that. I mean, look, that first year he was at Indiana, I mean, obviously that was, a rough year for the whole team. He probably was going to need to shoulder a lot of the weight offensively. I mean, that was the year Donovan McCulley really broke out in, second half of the season, and who really saw that coming, to that extent. But I mean, Williams was going to, the point being that Williams is going to have to shoulder less of a load than he would have had to initially when he came to Indiana. And it's just, everything sets up really well for him to be productive. He's got the size. He's a 6'4". He can go up and get the balls with just about anybody. I mean, he's got the size. He's got the talent to put it all together. It's just, can he stay healthy?
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. This is his 6th year, and he, at least in terms of FBS games, I only did this based on FBS games. He's played more college football than anybody else in the receiver room. He's played 45 games. I think Surratt would have him beat if I counted Surratt's pre JMU games, but so he's experienced. It's just a patchwork of experience over a long stretch of time. The two guys that are really flying under the radar, in my opinion, in the receiver room are Jonathan Brady and Mekhi Jackson. Brady, Cal transfer, former teammate of Fernando Mendoza, a late cycle transfer that I think was only made possible by the spring injury to Tyler Morris, the Michigan transfer. Brady, projects to fill that slot role. He has 98 career catches for 1,317 yards and 10 touchdowns across 41 games. So a guy that clearly is checks the boxes as a production guy that Kurt Signetti likes. And then Mekhi Jackson, 73 catches, 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns over 25 FBS games. Former teammate of Elijah Surratt at the I don't even know what level St. Francis is. Maybe you do, but but that's where they played before going their separate ways to JMU and App State respectively. So, any thoughts on Brady or Jackson? I mean, I think those are two really talented guys that people probably just don't know a lot about right now.
I agree in general with that. It felt like this fall camp, from a lot of what we've seen, that maybe Brady had a little bit of catch up to do, just coming in late after
Sure.
spring ball. Obviously he's got the existing rapport with Fernando Mendoza, but it's felt like maybe he's playing a little bit of catch up, just with the system and just kind of figuring everything out and getting acclimated. And obviously, some guys take to that quicker than others. This is not Brady played at New Mexico State before Cal as well, and so he has moved around enough to where you would figure he'll settle in in due time. But at least from what we saw, particularly early on, it felt like maybe he was playing a little bit of catch up, and maybe wasn't getting looked at the same level as some of the other guys in the room. But I mean, the existing rapport has to matter for something with having played with Fernando Mendoza already. And yeah, I mean, you're right. He probably would not be in Bloomington if Tyler Morris stayed healthy, but I think, the production is absolutely the type of guy that Kurt Signetti looks for. So I think it'll be, to me, Brady's a really interesting one to see, where he's at in it's hard for me to tell where Brady is at in the pecking order going into the season, just because of maybe being a little bit behind the eight ball in the system, entering fall camp, and between that and with the way that LeBron Bond has, like I said before, has really pushed for playing time. I think it's going to be interesting to see. To me, Brady, of anybody in this room, I think Brady is the most interesting guy for me to see where he falls in the pecking order. To me, it's hard for me to tell. Mekhi Jackson is a really, yeah, I think he's probably, I mean, Brady aside, these are the two guys that are flying under the radar, so to speak, the most. I think Jackson probably for less reason than Brady, just because Jackson's been, with the program, at least since spring ball. So, Brady at least was kind of the late arrival. Mekhi Jackson is just kind of the quietly, guy that people aren't talking about much, but guy that absolutely could be making an impact on the field this season. I mean, he's 6 foot, right around 200 pounds. I mean, he's a guy that can at least has the size to kind of play inside, play outside. I think we've seen him do a little bit of both in fall camp, a little bit like Cooper there. And yeah, I mean, that versatility is only going to help him. He's looked like he's had good hands from what we could see. And you're like Brady. I mean, he has that production that Kurt Signetti always looks for. So that's certainly the type of guy you could easily see Indiana, working into their rotation in some facet.
And I thought it was really interesting last year, and I don't know how much of this was game planning or just, the ball finding different people in different games, but it seemed like there were games where Miles Cross would have a massive game and then you wouldn't even hear his name for 3 weeks, and kind of the same a little to a lesser extent with Keyshawn Williams. So I don't know how much of that's game planning versus, people just rising and falling in the pecking order from week to week. I don't know, but I suspect there will be those scenarios with guys like Jackson and Brady where they're definitely going to have big moments, and I think everybody's going to benefit from a lot of attention on Elijah Surratt, who I don't want to skip, but I also think everybody's well aware of. A second team preseason All-American today, countless other preseason honors after a massive year last year, and big things expected. Um, I guess, another interesting guy in this room that it's easy to forget about, but we've heard Kurt Signetti, say positive things about and kind of project to have a bright future would be Charlie Becker. Um, but he doesn't seem like he's necessarily like in the clear mix for this season. Any thoughts or counters to that?
I would tend to agree. I mean, he's probably at least in like the second, at least in the second tier. I'm not even just saying in the twos, but in the second tier of this wide receiver room, at least, for this year. But I mean, everything we've seen of him in fall camp has looked good. I mean, he's a big dude. He too can kind of go up and get it. And we haven't seen anything, negative, so to speak, for me to kind of question, what's he doing here? He certainly
Right.
looks the part. I mean, I just don't know how much we're really going to see him this season.
Yeah, fair. And he's got some versatility to him. I seem to recall some talk about, and I think his touchdown last year was he was lined up at running back. So I don't know. I feel like he's one of those guys that they could use in a lot of different creative ways. So we'll see how that goes. The other two freshmen, Davion Chandler, Miles Kendrick. When I've had brief glimpses of them in fall camp, I got the impression those are guys that are going to take a red shirt year and probably not play much this year. I don't know if you have any other reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it would be really surprising to me if Kendrick or Chandler see the field this year. They look like good players, and I see why Indiana brought them in. I don't
Yeah,
think the fact that we expect them to redshirt, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think Indiana just has a deep wide receiver room, and I don't think they're gonna. It will be a bad thing, I think, if Indiana really needs Miles Kendrick or Davion Chandler. They just haven't kind of pushed the way and kind of impressed the way that LeBron Bond has. But I don't think that means that Kendrick or Chandler, have. I don't think that says anything about their future. I think it just says more about their wide receiver room.
right, right. So I mean, I think this for me anyway is going to be a constant across all of our conversations about the offensive position groups. I mean, I think at worst I'm going to say they're where they were last year. I think in a couple scenarios I'm going to say they're better. I mean, I'm starting to feel like there's a lot more reasons to think the offense is going to be better next year than or this year than they were last year, which is really hard to imagine. But obviously, a lot of that depends on quarterback play and how Fernando Mendoza performs when the lights are on it and he's facing the threat of actually being tackled for the first time. So I think we can leave it there unless you got anything else to talk about from a wide receiver perspective.
I think we covered it.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, we're under the gun now. We are under full pressure to get through this one opponent, one position cycle. So I think as soon as tomorrow, if you're up for it, we should turn the page to Oregon and tight ends. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sounds like a deal. Well, for now, he is Seth Tao. I am Mike Schumann, and this is East 17th Street. We'll catch you all very soon.